Read, read, read to your child every day. This can't be emphasized enough. Books open up the whole world to the child. His concepts increase and his mind develops as he thinks about the content in books. When the child gets older, as he reads, he needs to see pictures in his mind of places, events, and characters, conflict, and so on. He also has to be able to hear what is going on in the books, such as characters' voices, the wind blowing in the trees, the noises in the city, and so on. Most importantly, the child has a one-on-one relationship with the book. The book speaks directly to his individual mind. The child can read in silence as he reacts and thinks about what he reads. He feels comfortable being alone and becomes confident in his mind's ability to learn. When I purchased books for my children, I looked for two things: content and beauty. I read every book from cover to cover to make sure the content was appropriate and reflected my values and did not contain any politically correct messages. I would even sometimes white out certain words and insert my own. I also looked for beautiful illustrations. However, if the content was really good but only had fair illustrations, I would still buy the book. Don't pass up a really good story or a good message just because the illustrations aren't good. Buy books that reflect your child's interests. Also keep in mind, a book may look boring or great to you, but you won't know how your child takes to it until you read to him. Experiment. All children are different. When I am done reading a book, I ask the children if the book was fiction or nonfiction. Since young children have a hard time distinguishing the difference between reality and fantasy, they need help with this. You can ask them questions to get them to figure it out, such as, do animals talk? Do you think this could really happen? Have you ever seen a pig drive a car? And so on. If they can't figure something out, such as if monsters are real, you will need to reassure them that they are just pretend, but bear in mind that it will still take time and experience before they realize that you are right. I want to emphasize that the books that I have in this presentation do not include every book that I recommend. There are many wonderful books that I have enjoyed reading to children. And don't forget the classics such as Little Red Hen, Make Way for Ducklings, The Little Engine That Could, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, Dr. Seuss books, Tiki Tiki Tembo, The Carrot Seed, Caps for Sale, and on and on and on. But have fun exploring the world of books with your child. If you are looking for books for newborns, they typically like black and white pictures. These are a couple of books for children from 12 months on. The book on the left, My First Look at Colors, is actually one book from a series of books. So they have colors and shapes and seasons and all kinds of subjects. But children this age like actual pictures of objects. Now, this was one of our children's first books, and it was her favorite book, and she carried it around the house with her. So it was a huge, huge hit. The book on the right, Elmer's Colors, is a very colorful book and very vibrant and very attractive. And it was also a hit with our children. These books are good for children 12 to 18 months of age. I've also seen children older than that enjoy these books. But these are really good for object permanence. So they're the lift the flap books where you can see the child at the top is lifting the flap and they see what's underneath. And they really enjoy those books. The books on the bottom will ask them a question and they will try to figure out the answer. Then they lift the flap to see what the answer is. This is a lift the flap book with adventure. It involves the reader in the narrative by trying to get through the book without waking up the enormous, scary giant. What will they do if he wakes up? The children laugh with pleasure when they find out at the end and will ask you to read it again and again. It's a very clever and fun book. I can remember as a child really enjoying these kinds of books where there's a plastic overlay, and when you bring the page from one side to the other, you can see different parts of the inside of something, like the different parts of the inside of the body. And these books, called the First Discovery books, there's a lot of them, and there are a lot of pages like that. So with the ladybug on the right, you could see its wings spread if the page was on the right, but now the page is on the left, and you see the under part of him. Multisensorial books, where the child can feel different textures, is a huge hit. They can feel something soft, something scratchy, something bumpy. They're really fun. Now for alphabet books, you're going to want to read them phonetically. So like for Dr. Seuss's book, alphabet book, you would read big A, little a. What begins with A? Aunt Annie's alligator. A. Here's some other fun alphabet books. Alphabet City, you would want to do that with a child just a little bit older because it deals with all capital letters. But what's fun about this is there's pictures in there of different things in the environment, and then they try to find letters in those pictures. And then I Spy, an Alphabet and Art, has different pictures of art pieces, and then they find different objects in those pictures. So like this, the cover would be I Spy with my little eye, something that starts with A, so that would be apple. Alphabears is just a very traditional, sweet alphabet book. And then the Book of Shadow Boxes, it shows a bunch of pictures on each page. So like each page would have a letter, and then the child would find things on that page that start with that particular sound. Okay, these books are really good for rhyming and rhythm. And The Piggy in the Puddle, you got to listen to this. This is really fun. See the piggy, see the puddle, see the muddy little puddle, see the piggy in the middle of the muddy little puddle, see her dawdle, see her diddle in the muddy, muddy middle, see her waddle plump and little in the merry, merry middle. The whole book goes on like that. And when our kids were about 18 months to 2 years old, they would just walk in a circle, just keep walking in a circle when I would read that. They love the rhythm of that. And then the book on the bottom, Jamberry, the illustrations are absolutely delightful. And it's just all about different kinds of berries. And they have music that goes with it that is really catchy for the children. I'm going to read you this entire book. This was one of my favorites to read to the children, and I think you'll be able to hear why it is so much fun. You'll be able to hear the rhythm and the rhyming, and it is just really fun. Eddie's off to find his Teddy. Teddy's name is Freddie. He lost him in the woods somewhere. It's dark and horrible in there. Help, said Eddie. I'm scared already. I want my bed. I want my Teddy. He tiptoed on and on until something made him stop quite still. Look out, he thought. There's something there. What's that? A giant teddy bear. Is it Freddie? Said Eddie. What a surprise. How did you get to be this size? You're too big to huddle and cuddle, he said, and I'll never fit both of us into my bed. Then, out of the darkness, clearer and clearer, the sound of sobbing came nearer and nearer. Soon the whole woods could hear the voice bawl. How did you get to be tiny and small? You're too small to huddle and cuddle, it said, and you'll only get lost in my giant-sized bed. It was a gigantic bear and a tiny teddy stomping toward the giant teddy and Eddie. My Ted, gasped the bear. A bear, screamed Eddie. A boy, yelled the bear. My Teddy, cried Eddie. Then they ran through the dark woods back to their homes as fast as they could, all the way back to their snuggly beds where they huddled and cuddled their own little Teds. This is another one of my very favorite books to read to the children. It's a story about a little girl, Daisy Head Maisie, who has a flower that sprouts on the top of her head, and it's a story of how that's resolved. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of this so you can get the flavor of what it sounds like. It's hard to believe such a thing could be true, and I hope such a thing never happens to you. But it happened, they say, to poor Maisie McGrew, and it happened like this. She was sitting one day at her desk in her school in her usual way when she felt a small twitch on the top of her head. So Maisie looked up and she almost dropped dead. Something peculiar was going on there. A daisy was sprouting right out of her hair. The kids in the class started shouting like crazy, Daisy head, Daisy head, Daisy head, Maisie. Children, be quiet, good grief and alas. Miss Sneecher was shocked by the noise in her class. I've taught in this room 20 years, maybe more, but I've never seen anything like this before. I'll have to report it. You'll just have to come to the principal's office and show Mr. Grum. Rhyming and rhythm. Okay, the first book, Never Take a Pig to Lunch, is just full of really fun poetry. There's a lot of humor in it. It has the poem, I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream, that type of thing. So that is delightful. And then Rachel Pfister's blister. Rachel Pfister found a blister on her left-hand toe. Just a tiny little blister, but she thought her mom should know. Mrs. Pfister saw the blister on poor little Rachel's toe. Sent for Mr. Harvey Pfister, for she thought he should know. It goes on and on like that. In this Quiet Wyatt book, I love this book. The children love this one. The big kids on Wyatt Street were building a model plane. Wyatt said, I'd like to fly it. But the big kids said, Quiet, Wyatt, you're not old enough to fly a plane. Wyatt's sister was washing the car. Wyatt said, I'd like to dry it. But his sister frowned and said, Quiet, Wyatt, you're not big enough to dry a car. So the story goes on, and he proves to everybody that there are some things that he can do, and so they change their attitude. Now, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, this is an alphabet book, but you're going to have to read it. You're not going to be able to read it phonetically. You're going to have to use the names of the letters. Otherwise, it won't rhyme. So this is what it sounds like. A told B and B told C, I'll meet you at the top of the coconut tree. Wee, said D to E, F, G, I'll beat you to the top of the coconut tree. Chicka chicka boom boom, will there be enough room? Here comes H up the coconut tree. And I and J and tag along K, all on their way up the coconut tree. Chicka chicka boom boom, will there be enough room? Look who's coming, L M N O P and Q R S and T U V. And it goes on like that. The day the goose got loose. When the goose got loose, she caused a riot. Nobody ever thought she'd try it. There wasn't any more peace and quiet the day the goose got loose. When the goose got loose, the hens were mad. The goose ate all the grain they had. The rooster sulked and the chicks were sad the day the goose got loose. So that gives you an idea of what that book is like. More rhyming and rhythm. The first book, The Bear Whose Bones Were Jezebel Jones. I'll read it to you so you can get an idea of what it sounds like. Carrying a bathing suit, snorkel, and fins, a bear trotted down to a lake for a swim. But before he jumped in, he took off his skin to rinse off his bones. Skipping along came Jezebel Jones. Wow, she said, look at this skin. She picked it up and climbed right in, and zipped it up and scampered away to see what her friends at school would say. She was sitting there quietly in one of her classes when her teacher said, Jezebel, and put on his glasses. You seem a bit hairy and berry and scary. He picked up his papers and ran away fast, and so did the rest of Jezebel's class. So the story goes on like that, and she's scaring these different people. And then at the end of the book, she gets out of the bear's skin. The bear gets back in his skin, and it all turns out like that. And then Jake Baked the Cake and Engelbert the Elephant and The Wonderful Pigs of Jillian Jiggs. Those are rhyming and rhythm books. And then Who Said Red? This book surprised me. It's very simple, but our two kids like this very much. And I'll read you a little bit of this. Who said red? Did you say red? A Santa red? A stop sign red? A cherry berry very red? Did you say red? Yes, I said red. You don't mean green. Look, here is green, a pickle green, a big frog green, a leaf, a tree, a green bean green. Did you say green? No, I said red. Anyway, for some reason, they really love that book. Now, Fathers, Mothers, Sisters, Brothers is a poetry book, and it's the poems in there are all about families, and it's just delightful. These books have repetition and sequencing in them, and they're very good for children. They listen to them and then they start to remember what the sequence is and try to remember the sequence in the books. So the Napping House, the first one, has beautiful illustrations, and when I would read this to the children at school, they really love this book. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this one. There is a house, a napping house, where everyone is sleeping. And in that house there is a bed, a cozy bed, and a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And on that bed there is a granny, a snoring granny on a cozy bed and a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And on that granny there is a child, a dreaming child on a snoring granny on a cozy bed and a napping house where everyone is sleeping. So it goes on like that. It keeps adding things onto the bed and onto granny. And then a wakeful flea lands on the slumbering mouse, on a snoozing cat, on a dozing dog, on a dreaming child, on a snoring granny, on a cozy bed, and a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And then they all come off one by one. And once you've read this to them several times, you can say, what comes off next? What comes off next? And see if they can remember. Now the book, Froggy Gets Dressed, the whole Froggy series is very sweet and very fun. And one of my favorite ones is the one about Froggy and Halloween. And there's a little girl frog that likes him, and her name is Frogalina. And I think it was the Halloween book where she gives him a kiss, and he turned more red in the face than green. Anyway, they're just very sweet books. Well, I would read those, and this mother came to me one time and she said that book got her child interested in reading, that one book, that he just loved them so much. And then Giraffe and a Half is a pretty common book, but again, they're adding things. If you give a mouse a cookie, you keep adding things to the story, and there's a repetition, and you can see if the child can remember the things that are added. And then Brown Bear, what do you see? You know, children like 18 months love this book. Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. And it goes on like that. And then after you've read this to them for many times, then you can see if they can remember what comes on the next page. And one of my grandsons had me read that to him over and over and over and over. So that's a good book. Here's a traditional children's rhyme and nonsense song, which has good repetition. The woman swallows increasingly large animals, each to catch the previously swallowed animal. When she swallows the horse and dies, real-world logic is abruptly applied to the song. Some books come with a CD of the music. There are also puppets of the old lady and stuffed animals that can be purchased. The picture of the puppet on the right has a large mouth, and all the animals can fit into it as the song is played. I had this book and puppet and used it in school. The children loved it. These books have either very unique artwork or very beautiful artwork. The book that says A Child's Book of Art is just a wonderful book to snuggle up with your child on the couch, and it has beautiful paintings in there, and then you look for certain things in the paintings, like it might say there's find the children in the picture or something like that. I really enjoyed that with my kids when they were little. And the book Animalia has that's an alphabet book, and so there's things on every page that begin with a certain letter, and the kids like finding that. Fish Eyes, one of our kids loved that. It's a counting book. And then Miss Spider's Tea Party has some rhyme and rhythm to it. The Paper Princess it's just a sweet story. So is Flower Garden. Oh, the pictures, the paint, the artwork in Flower Garden and Anna and the Bagpiper are very, very pretty. Humor and or problem solving. The first book, Beware of Boys, is about a wolf who has plans to eat a boy, but the boy outsmarts him. And when I first started reading this book to the children at school, some of the children were a little frightened in the beginning, but then they started to catch on that the boy was outsmarting the wolf, and they ended up liking that book. That was a popular book. The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. Of course, the children need to be familiar with the traditional story of the Three Little Pigs first. But this is hilarious. It's the story from the pig's point of view, and he says that this is the real story. Bamboozled shows odd things going on in each page, and like, for example, a person coming out of a painting or mowing a lawn in the living room, and the child tries to figure out what is odd. The young child, 2 and 3-year-olds, will not be able to figure out any or maybe just a few things that are odd. The 5 and 6-year-olds will think that this book is very funny. Sally's room is very funny. I'll read you a little bit of this. Late one morning, as Sally got ready for school, she stepped on a stegosaurus, then she stepped on a triceratops. She couldn't find her colored pencils, and she couldn't find her favorite sweater. Sally left the house that morning in a very bad mood. Sally's room was in a bad mood, too. The lamp spoke up. "What are you laughing at?" It glared at the globe. "You've got socks on your head. Ha ha," explained the globe. "You've both got socks on your head," said a clock with no batteries. "Never mind that," yelled a chair. "Look at me. Who could sit on me? I'm stuffed. I'm going under." "Ick," said a fish bowl that badly needed scrubbing. "Yuck," said a half a peanut butter sandwich. "That's nothing," said the bureau. "Just look at that bed." So they have this discussion, and then they decide, "Let's go find Sally right now," they all shouted. "Let's tell her just how we feel." Sally's messy room marched on out the door and down the street through the center of the town, past the corner market, past the library, past the fire station, up the long driveway to school. People almost fainted when they saw it. Even dogs and cats ran away fast. And then, at the school, the custodian got excited and fell into a bush. The principal screamed. Squeezing through the front door was not easy, but Sally's room was determined. It got in. Down the hall and up the stairs it went, looking for Sally. So it goes on like that. But at the end of the book, she figures out how to keep her room neat and orderly. And then the next book, Arabulis, is about the Arabuli family. There's dozens of them, and they have a collection of very bizarre pets, and they come to live on a street called Liberty Street. And there's a man and his wife there. His name is General Pinch, and his wife is nasty, and they're really enraged because this family is having so much fun. And they hate anything that looks like fun for anyone who is different. So this means war. But the children of Liberty Street love the Arabulis, and they cook up a very good plan that results in a very happy ending. And that is a lot of fun. Grandpa's Teeth is very funny. It starts out with Grandpa. He says, "Help! I've been robbed." We heard Grandpa shouting, "It's a disaster! Come quickly!" He was still shouting as Mom, Agatha, and I ran up the stairs. Grandpa's room was a mess, but to be honest, it was always a mess. He blamed Gump, his old dog, but Gump looked too old to me to make much of a mess. What was taken, gasped Mom? Your VCR? Your television? Not your gold-plated golfing trophy. No, said Grandpa. It's much more serious. It's my teeth. They've been stolen. So his teeth were stolen. And the book goes through this big investigation to find out what happened to his teeth. And they even get the police involved and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the book, you find out who stole the teeth. And it's very clever. And then Winnie the Witch is a story about a black witch. She has a black house. Everything is black, and even her cat is black. And so the cat gets tripped over and stuff like that because since everything's black, you can't see the black cat. So Winnie changes the cat into all these different colors. And like the first color that she changes the cat to is green. So the cat goes and sits in the grass and nobody can see him, so he's tripped over again. Finally, she changes him to all different colors, but the cat is really embarrassed. So at the end, Winnie decides to change the color of the house so that the cat can stay black. It's just very clever, very cute. And then Pigsty is a story about a little boy who has a very messy room. And, it starts out like this. Monday afternoon, Wendell Foltz's mother told him to clean his room. It's turning into a pigsty, she said. Wendell went upstairs. Much to his surprise, a large pig was sitting on his bed. Pardon me, said Wendell. He shoved some toys into his closet. But the pig didn't seem to mind the mess, and Wendell found that he didn't mind the pig either. So his mother comes to look in his room, and it's still a mess. She threw up her hands. Okay, Wendell, if you want to live in a pigsty, that's up to you. So every day or periodically another pig comes in his room, and then he finally decides that he doesn't really like all those pigs in his room because then things get stepped on and he doesn't like that. And so in the end, he decides that he's going to clean his room. And Sally's Room and the Pigsty books are really fun to talk about with kids because I used to say, is your room a mess? And they'd go, oh, no, Miss Shar, it's not. And then you'd get one child that would raise their hand and go, well, my room's a mess. Anyway, it was really fun. Those books are fun. More humor. So we'll start with We Eat Dinner in the Bathtub. This is a good book for topsy-turvy humor. Do you want to eat dinner at my house, Josh? Okay, Harris. We eat dinner in the bathtub. The bathtub? Yeah. Why do you do that? You should eat dinner in the dining room. We sleep in the dining room. Don't you have a bathroom? Yes, we cook in my bedroom. Why don't you cook in the kitchen? There's no room. We park our car in the kitchen. And it goes on like that. And then Monsters Love Underpants. That is a funny story about monsters. Now, monsters have different ways to scare, but they all share a love for zany underwear. And every Saturday night, they gather in a secret cave and dance the Monster Bop. And then The Day the Crayons Quit. This child just wants to color. His name is Duncan. But when he opens his box of crayons, he finds a stack of letters, all saying the same thing. We quit. So the crayons are upset, and they all write him a nice long letter about why they're upset. Beige is tired of playing second fiddle to brown. Blue needs a break from coloring all that water, while pink just wants to be used. Green has no complaints, but orange and yellow are no longer speaking to each other. So the story is about how Duncan resolves all these complaints. For fear or separation anxiety, these books are good. Owl Babies was a book that I used to read in the fall when the new children were coming in and they were missing their mothers or their parents. And it's a story about these three owls and their the mother owl leaves to go get food or something, and then they miss her and they're worried about her, but she comes back just like they knew she would. And she says, "You knew I'd come back," and they were all happy to see her. So that's a good book to read to them for separation anxiety. And then Go Away, Big Green Monster. All kids, I don't know of any child that isn't scared of monsters. Well, with this book, with each page that you turn, the child can see more and more of the monster. And then you get to where you can see the entire monster in the book. And then in the middle, the book says, "You don't scare me, so go away, scraggly purple hair." And then as you turn the pages, little by little, the parts of the monster go away. And then at the end of the book, it says, "And don't come back until I say so." I Need My Monster is just a great book. This little boy goes to bed, and his monster left for the evening to go fishing. And he's very upset because he says, "I'm not going to get to sleep unless I have my monster." So these different monsters come to visit him, and there's something wrong with each one. One doesn't have long enough claws, and the other one just isn't scary enough, and stuff like that. And at the end, his real monster comes back to scare him, and he falls asleep. The Dark is a very, very fun book to read, and children will ask me to read it over and over and over again. But the Dark, this little boy is scared of the dark, and the dark tells him to come down in the basement where it's dark. He does, and some of the lines in the book are, "You might be afraid of the dark, but the dark isn't afraid of you." So anyway, he goes down in the basement, and the dark gives him a light bulb, and it's the whole book is in black. Most of it is in black, so that makes it really unique. And then sometimes when I would read it to them, I would tell them to close their eyes, and then I'd say, "Can you see the dark?" and stuff like that. It's a really cool book. Okay, for thinking skills, a house is a house for me. So I'm going to read you just a little bit of it. A hill is a house for an ant and ant. A hive is a house for a bee. A hole is a house for a mole or a mouse. And a house is a house for me. A web is a house for a spider. A bird builds its nest in a tree. There is nothing so snug as a bug in a rug, and a house is a house for me. So the book goes on, and then at the end of the book, you can ask the children to think of their houses. And I was amazed at the things that they came up with. Like, a chair is a house for a person, a shelf is a house for work, a face is a house for glasses, and so on. And then Q is for duck. Now, you'd want to do this with children that were a little bit older, but you take a letter, they take a letter, and they'll say, well, okay, A is for zoo. Do you know why? And the answer is because animals live in the zoo. B is for dog. Do you know why? Because dogs bark. So the answer is going to have a different sound than the letter. I mean, the normal way to do it is A is for animal, or B is for boy. So they have to think about it a little bit differently with this. And then with lookalikes, when they look at those things in the picture very closely, they can see that they're made out of different things. Like, for example, when they look at the building on the right-hand side, that yellow one is made out of crackers. And that's really fun to look through. Who wants a cheap rhinoceros? Okay, I'll read you just a little bit of this. Who wants a cheap rhinoceros? I know of one for sale, with floppy ears and cloppy feet and a friendly waggy tail. He's sweet and fat and huggable. He's quiet as a mouse, And there are lots of things that he can do around your house. For instance, you can use him for a coat hanger. So they show a picture of a child using him as a coat hanger. His coat is hung on his nose and he's flinging his hat over at the rhinoceros. He's a terrific back scratcher, and it shows a picture of the rhinoceros scratching the little boy's back. And he makes a very lovely lamp, and it shows a lampshade on top of his horn, stuff like that. So you go through the whole book, and then the very end of the book is very sweet because it says, and he is easy to love. So you can discuss with the child, can you think of other ways that you could use a rhinoceros? And then, is your mama a llama? That's a story about a baby llama. He goes to all his animal friends and asking them if their mama is a llama. And as you read the story, the child learns information about different animals. And he can also try to figure out when the animals are described what it is. The Z was zapped. This is an alphabet book, and it shows something happening to a letter, and the child tries to figure out what that is. But what it is that's happening to the letter starts with the sound of that letter. So the Z was zapped by lightning, and the wood was warped, and things like that. These books are really good for thinking skills. They're logic puzzles, and they're a lot of fun for the children to go through, and they find things and they try to figure out answers to things. And you can start a child with this at about age 4. Our children love them, and our grandchildren like them now. Independence and individuality. Okay, Meredith the Witch Who Wasn't is a story about a witch who didn't want to do magic. She wanted to do things all by herself. Egbert is a story about an egg in the refrigerator who was a painter, but it was discovered that he had a cracked shell, so he was told to leave. So no matter where he went, he tried to paint himself so that he would fit in, but he was always discovered. So then one day he travels the world and he discovers cracks at famous sites like volcanoes. So he decides it's okay to be cracked, and he's even a little proud of it. My head is filled with colors. Every morning when Maria wakes up, she finds that her hair is full of colors, or animals, or books, or people. But one day she wakes up and her head is full of nothing. She's upset because she thinks her head is empty. Or is it? A Bad Case of Stripes. Camellia Cream loves lima beans, but she never eats them. Why? Because the other kids in her school don't like them, and Camilla Cream is very, very worried about what other people think of her. In fact, she is so worried that she's about to break out in a bad case of stripes. So the story is about how that is resolved. I Like Me is a story about a character who is full of good feelings about herself. And what's good about this book is it can get a child to introspect. What do I like about myself? And then Odd Velvet is a story about a child who is odd. Velvet is odd. Instead of dolls that talk and cry, Velvet brings a milkweed pod for show and tell. She wins the class art contest using only an 8-pack of crayons. She likes to collect rocks. Even her name is strange, and so no one chooses Velvet for partner play. No one walks home with her after school. No one wants to be different, like the way Velvet is different. But as the school year unfolds, the things that Velvet does and the things that she says slowly begins to make sense. And in the end, Velvet's classmates discover that maybe Velvet isn't really so different after all. And then Fat Rosemary. This is a story about an overweight child who is made fun of, and her best friend betrays her. And it is a story also of how that is resolved. Snippy and Snappy is the story of two little field mice named Snippy and Snappy. They live with their parents in a cozy nook in a hayfield. Their father enthralls them with stories about gardens and big fields, houses and big gardens, kitchen cupboards and big houses, and big yellow cheeses in big kitchen cupboards. The book has some fun and repetitive phrases. I'll read you an excerpt. The mice find a ball of yarn, and they rolled it up, they rolled it down, they rolled it up and down, they rolled it up and down, they rolled it up and down. They rolled it over this and that, and over things both round and flat, and over things both small and tall, along a long, long garden wall. And when the mice go into a house, they think the objects there are from a hayfield. For example, they think a stool is a tree with 4 trunks. It's just a very clever and sweet book. The Big Green Pocketbook. A girl spends the day running errands with her mom. And while she is running errands with her mom, she collects many objects for her new green pocketbook. Once she goes home, she is upset to find out that she left her pocketbook on the bus. But it ends up, the bus driver finds it and drops it in the mailbox. She writes the bus driver a thank you note with her new crayons. It is a benevolent, cheerful, sweet story. Willie and May, one of our kids, loved this book and asked me to read it to her over and over, especially at Christmas time. It's a charming and quaint story of a young girl's relationship and adventures with her great aunt. Then one year, the girl is terribly disappointed when she thinks she will not be able to see her aunt at Christmas time because of a blizzard. Her aunt arrives in a sled with packages, but she can't remember the driver's name. I wonder who that was. Okay, never mail an elephant. The little boy wants to mail an elephant to his cousin for her birthday. He comes to some trouble when he finds out it is impossible to mail an elephant. And then Skippy John Jones. Skippy John Jones is no ordinary kitten. Oh no, he's actually El Scapito, a great sword fighter, ready to battle banditos the world over. With a whole lot of fun, this frisky cat dons a mask and cape and takes on a bad bumblebee to save the day. There are more Skippy John Jones books, but this is my favorite. It was the first one I read, and as I was reading it, the way the rhythm and the rhyming went and everything, all of a sudden I just started laughing because I was really getting into it. It's just a really fun book to read. But like I say, it's my favorite of the series. These books by Robert Munsch are really fun, and he has a lot more books than what I have pictured here. Most of them are very funny. Now, the one, Love You Forever, is a serious book, but the other ones are funny, and the children think that they're just delightful. And something that's unique about his books is as you read them to the children, they can make their own sound effects, and they really enjoy that. These books, oh, I love these books. The children love these books. They will ask for you to read it to them over and over. Well, actually, you don't have to read it to them because they come with a CD and they have beautiful music, or like Waking Up is Hard to Do. It's just a really fun, uplifting music. But Puff the Magic Dragon, Over the Rainbow, oh my gosh, those two books, they will ask you to read it over and over. And then Peter and the Wolf, that is a classic, and you just absolutely have to do that with kids. Even children as young as 2, that will hold their attention for a good amount of time. Now, it can be a little scary for them, but they seem to handle it okay, even though some children will tell me that it's scary. But I just highly recommend these kinds of books where there's a CD and they play really pretty music for the child. Most of the books I have presented here are fiction books, but don't neglect nonfiction books that talk about real-life subjects, such as animals, botany, inventions, history, inside the human body, outer space, and so on. Here is a book for children that I wrote. It is a true story of the founding of the United States. It begins with the story of Columbus, shows how his discovery led to the exploration of the world, how that led to colonization, which led to a colony established in America called Jamestown, which led to the Revolutionary War, which led to the Declaration of Independence, and eventually the end of the war and the establishment of the United States. There have been lots of books about the Revolutionary War, events, and people, but this book essentializes and summarizes the entire story and tells the children the meaning of the Declaration of Independence, the fact that your life belongs to you, and the fact that the idea that your life belongs to you, the idea of freedom, was a brand new idea. I did this story as a unit with my children in the classroom. It is a long story, so I only told them a little bit each day, and then we would review it the next day before I told them the next part. And I would often leave them with a cliffhanger, like I would say, "What do you think the Americans did when the king said that they had to buy all of his tea?" And then the children would have discussions during class time trying to figure it out. When we were done reading the book, the children did a timeline where they put all the events in order. And then I also had a set of what I called riddles, where I would read them something and they would try to figure out the answer. For example, who said, "Give me liberty or give me death"? What was the name of the first colony in America? Who was the king that the colonists were angry with? And they loved doing these riddles. They would often come and sit around while I would read them, and it was just, this unit was one of my very favorites to present to the children. They really loved it a lot. And, you know, all children should know the history of their country. I think that that is very, very important. So I loved it, and they loved it too. I hope you enjoyed this presentation about children's books. If you have any questions about reading books to children or about Montessori, please feel free to contact me at my website, cushmanbooks.com.